So kind of goes through what we'd like to see, in a POC, and where we've seen success with a proof of concept as well. POC is a really powerful piece of work that can lead to success. So we've got an example here where we had a construction company. They dealt with engineering components of construction, so civil engineering, with drawings, designs. So they had 3D models. They had large objects of data. They worked on expensive desktop PCs in the office. So they had 2 offices in the UK, and everything was fine. You go into the office, you do your work. Everything was saved on my local desktop, file server in the corner. Everyone's happy. This is how we worked for years and years. COVID happened. Okay, you can't get to the office. How are we able to have access to our desktops? So they deployed TeamViewer. Okay, they can then get on via their home PCs, their laptops, to a PC. They can do their work to a limited fashion. If anyone's used TeamViewer, it's a fantastic product, but it does introduce latency. It does introduce extra cost. It does introduce some complexities with sharing resources. There's a whole security constraint around it as well. So it was a short-term fix for a larger problem of not being able to get to the office to work on civil engineering drawings and things like that. So it was a short-term fix to get around that problem. It also led to management problems as well. So having to enforce where documents are. People were copying documents to their local home PCs. They were working on unlicensed software that were installed, and not configuration controlled. They had no control over obviously the home PCs in terms of patches and versions, and that management capability in terms of Active Directory as well. So passwords expired. How service desk had to go through and reset lots of passwords. There's no way of doing that remotely, and they looked at maybe potentially replacing the desktop services with graphic intense laptop replacements. And, when you get to high-end laptops, you're talking a few £1,000s per user. It's not a nice task to have to try and validate and quantify, having to deploy 50, 60 laptops for my engineering department, and have that over the next 3-5 years as well, and having to support that, onboard that, manage that, deploy it, roll it out. What other tools do I need in place for that? So there's lots and lots of drivers that led this company to engaging with us to ultimately come up with a solution. They've heard of WVD. They thought, okay, there's some things here that we could do. We do have some fears. How responsive will the engineering software that we use be to doing things over the internet? At the end of the day, you're delivering a desktop service over the internet. I'm worried about latency. I'm worried about my engineers, my designers being able to manipulate graphical images over an internet connection. I have genuine concerns there. The engineers have concerns. Please mitigate these concerns. Okay, I'm dealing with large data files as well. We're loading models, 3D models and images. They're stored in my office in a file server. How am I able to retrieve them? How am I able to load these models, share these models? How can I ultimately work in this collaborative environment that I used to in the office? Longer term, how can I replace these on-premise desktops? When we do go back to work, are we just going to switch these back on and just go back to the way we were working before, or is this a better way of working? Being able to work remotely, being able to work maybe 2-3 days at home, working from different sites. Because we did it that way before, doesn't mean that's the way we're going to do it going forward. So they wanted to explore a more productive way of working going forward. So that led to us going through, making sure we deployed the services to establish a successful POC. We deployed the software. We deployed graphics capable instances within Azure. They were able to test the software successfully. Actually, pleasantly surprised. They've tried Citrix previously, and they weren't happy with the performance that they got from that. So moving to WVD, they were actually pleasantly surprised with how performant the software was in this Windows 10 environment, and being able to manipulate files over the VPN initially, and then we moved their files into Azure, which gave a greater performance. You're using data center speeds, bandwidth, backplane speeds, within an Azure data center, so you're able to move and load images at a greater speed than they were used to. So they'd load some images, they'd wait 5-10 minutes, even on their desktops, and they'd go and get a cup of tea, have a chat, then they'd come back, the data was loaded, then they could do their work. But with the Azure environment, it was loaded instantaneously, and they were like, wow, okay, I'm going to be cutting down on my coffee now because I'm having to do more work. And that allowed us to then establish the pilot rollout for these users. We were able to allow them to ultimately replace the desktop services that they had. The users were able to do their job in a more performant manner. Sorry, just sneezing there. And it allowed us to increase not just the productivity of that user, but also increase security postures. So there was other projects that came out of this afterwards. Once we'd done this successfully, we deployed the pilot rollout. We were able to look at things like conditional access and multi-factor authentication for Active Directory components. They were able to enforce configuration management controls through endpoint management aspects as well, to deploying and managing, looking after the Windows images. They were able to establish further capabilities from the modeling as well, doing things quicker and faster. Like I said, we moved their file repository from an on-premise file server into Azure, so we could take advantage of the cheaper disk and the DR capabilities of that as well within Azure. So it really led to a wider transformation based on some initial drivers, which were, we can't get into our office because we're not allowed to leave our homes. So it's a really good story there, and hopefully you can see some common drivers that you've kind of gone through the last year as well.